Remnants from a huge industry in Bristol, Pennsylvania, can only be seen when the tide is low along the Delaware River. The Harriman district in Bristol was home to one of Merchant Shipbuilding Corporation's sites. But let's discuss how this site came to be. Between 1830 and 1860, the shipping industry advanced rapidly, with packet ships, clippers, and a rise of steam power reshaping global trade. However, restrictive policies and shifting markets led to a sharp decline, and by 1914, American ships carried only about 10% of ocean trade. The start of World War I made the problem impossible to ignore. The Foreign Ship Registry Act was signed into law in 1914, allowing foreign-built ships to be registered under the U.S. flag. This move unintentionally set the stage for what soon would become the Shipping Act of 1916. Originally conceived when U.S. was at peace with no anticipation of war. When the U.S. entered World War I in 1917, the response was for the United States Shipping Board to create the Emergency Fleet Corporation, whose goal was to strengthen America's merchant fleet needed to transport American troops and their supplies. It was an enormous shipbuilding program. This is where a wealthy railroad heir, W. Averell Harriman, left his mark on Bristol Borough. A graduate of Yale, his father had built his fortune controlling many major railroads, and when he passed away, he left Averell a large, wealthy estate. He first purchased a shipyard in Chester in early 1917, renaming it Merchant Shipbuilding Corporation. He then won more government contracts to build even more ships, and that is when he needed a second shipyard. This is where he purchased a property in Bristol Borough. The plan was bold. A brand new shipyard in Bristol, Pennsylvania, dedicated to turning out 40 steel freighters, each weighing almost 9,000 tons. The ships were built to a blueprint, which was the EFC design 1025, the standard 9,000-ton dead-weight cargo ship with 2 decks and 3 islands, intended for heavy cargo work. Design 1025 was built at Harriman's Bristol Yard and Newburgh, New York, along with Pensacola, Florida. Construction on the Bristol Yard began once the contract was signed. Steam shovels made excavations for the shipways, and dredging the river also had begun. But this wasn't just a shipyard. It became a company town. A new village rose up behind the yard to house workers and their families. They named it Harriman. Not one of the 40 ships contracted was finished during war. When the war ended, the option for Harriman's extra 20 ships was canceled, but Merchant Shipbuilding continued to operate the Bristol shipyard to fulfill its 40-ship contract. The need for new ships declined dramatically in the years after 1918. There is a website where you can see the names of the ships built and what later became of them. The last ship built was the Arden. Once it left the site, the workers felt a heaviness in the air. By February of 1921, the Bristol Yard shut down for good. The government quickly lost interest in the planned worker town of Harriman, putting the entire community up for auction that December. Residents and investors bought the homes, while Bristol Borough annexed Harriman and took over its services. Many of the grand community buildings, like the Victory Hotel and Merchant Restaurant, were demolished within a few years. Their sites filled with new homes. Though the U.S. Shipping Board built worker housing at other shipyards, Harriman stood out above the rest. The Harriman Historic District is listed on a National Register of Historic Places. So just to give you an idea exactly where we're at in Bristol, that is the northern tip of Burlington Island. Now Burlington Island is a part of New Jersey, but there is a gap but the Delaware River is dividing. And Bristol Wharf is just up that way, maybe about 3/4 of a mile up that way. There's one thing to notice about these square footings is if you look at the historical photo, it didn't start here and go out. It started here and went in. So right now there's a bank with condominiums in the background. But these footings are absolutely massive. And one thing you'll notice that you can compare to the photo is that this one's flat, this one's flat, and there's ones with pillars. But you can only see these during low tide. Right now, the tide is at its lowest point for today. This is the Delaware River. It is a partially tidal river, meaning the tide only affects the areas up into Trenton, I believe, the Trenton area. And then after that, all the way north, the tides do not affect the river. So along these banks is where the shipbuilding would have taken place. And this is where the pillars begin. There's a brick. Something glass. There's a pipe. Now, yeah, you can see the tide just went out. Here's another brick. High fired or AI fired? That's interesting. Oh. There's minnows in this water right there. bricks all over. Seagulls are hanging out. Some remnants here. Just a quick interruption. I had found some Sanborn maps, and there were 12 shipways in this area. In addition to the 12 shipways, there were also 2 fitting out ports. When I did the Boots on the Ground Explore, I had found what I thought were dock remnants. But according to the Sanborn maps, it looks like those docks were actually the fitting out ports. Notice all the concrete rubble along here. We are just at the end of the footers. There's nothing but bricks here. I'd like to also mention that there was another industry in this area. I didn't expect to find any remnants from that industry, but I did. Originally, it was known as Keystone Aircraft Corporation from the early 1920s to 1932. The plant was then purchased by Fleet Wings in 1934. The company fortunes grew rapidly in the early 1940s, fueled by a steady stream of military contracts during World War II. In 1943, Henry J. Kaiser's industrial empire purchased the firm, renaming it Kaiser Fleet Wings Corporation. At its peak in 1944, the Bristol plant employed over 6,000 workers. But after the war ended, demand fell sharply. Unable to recover, Kaiser Fleet Wings shut down its operations in 1962. I met with an archivist at the Grundy's Library. She has a large collection of Kaiser Fleetwing material, including this old toolbox from one of the workers. I am very thankful for viewing that collection, and a special thanks goes out to Grundy's Library. The 2 large industries helped employ thousands of people throughout the years, helped add on to the many layers of history that Bristol, Pennsylvania already has. The industrial buildings are mostly gone, except for the general stores and mold loft building that was constructed in 1917 and was a part of the Merchant Shipbuilding Yard. That is also a part of the National Historic Register. It is also known as Building 13. The large concrete footprints from the shipbuilding cranes are mostly still there, but not everyone knows what they were, or realized that they were a part of the very industry that built an entire district. Thank you for watching. Until next time.